Hi, so let's try to do this update this week, but we'll try to do it a little bit differently because this is going to be the first update that I'm going to do publicly available and obviously available for sharing because I've been asked to share it around to more people. Um, I'll start with a small outline. I am not a military expert. I don't claim to be a military expert. It's just I have a personal stake in this war because my family and friends live in Ukraine, and that's why I'm closely following everything. One of the major things why it gets me, I guess, good to understanding the situation is because what of my nature, I am good at processing, gathering and processing a lot of information, a lot of data, and making sense of it. So, because I can do this, I can also follow the war and trying to understand what is happening. And I read a lot of news sources. I can read both natively in Ukrainian and in Russian and in English, obviously. So I am able to comprehend information from multiple sources around this conflict and understand what is more or less happening. I am biased towards Ukraine winning this conflict, but I'm still hopeful that they will do it with as least people killed as possible. So I'm trying to be also a little bit more optimistic on the situation. With that said, let's get it down. Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting quite hard in the war with Russia. That much we know. But important before we start going into the map is to understand the situation. So Russia has been trying to attack the east side of Ukraine on multiple occasions now. Well, not multiple occasions, but in multiple days now. And this hasn't gone too fast because if you follow at least a little bit about the situation in Ukraine, you're going to see this map and you will not be able to tell which exact date this map is from because this is seems that it doesn't really change that much. And you will be absolutely right. But basically, that means that Ukraine is doing well because Ukraine wants to prevent any kind of advance by the Russians. And if you cannot noticeably see any advance, that means only one thing: Ukraine is doing good. With that said, so last week the rains finally stopped in the east region of Ukraine, and the ground is finally nice and solid. So some maneuverable tactics are available for Russians to exploit, and they can advance in a lot of directions. What creates a lot of issues for the Russians is obviously Ukrainian, but secondly is the fact that this is a political war. There is very poor military command that's being reported on the ground. I mean, we already know that judging by the North campaign around Kiev, but I'm also saying that this also means what kind of a military operation is being performed. Most of the experts agree on the fact that if you want to have a military target completed, you set out that target and you achieve it. With Russians here, you will notice something strange. Like the creator of this map has actually outlined it quite well. You will see that we have this northeastern direction, well, regarding this center of history, right? Where you see the arrow here. There is no arrow. I'm actually going to draw. Can I make this a little bit smaller? Let's see. So you see the arrow here. There should be an arrow here. Do you see the arrow here? Then there's arrow here. There should be actually arrow also here, 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 here. Then Avdiivka, yes, here. Marinka also, yes, they trying to go also here and then try to advance here. They also want to try to kind of push here, a little bit here. And they've also declared and started gathering some strength to push, you see, here, here towards this direction. And they're also trying to push these strengths here. I'm gonna zoom out the map and you will explain to me what's the problem here with what I said so far. Exactly. There is no like a dedicated point of attack. The Russians are trying to attack on all front line, which is a huge waste of the resources. It is extremely important because Russian army that is gathered here is not 300 or 500 or 700 or 2 million people. It is just 90,000 with about 20,000 extra in reserves, uh, plus minus. That is not a lot. This whole line is about 1,000 kilometers. Like this whole thing is about 1,000 kilometers. That is a lot. That is a lot of ground with not a lot of people and not a lot of dedication. So what this obviously disperses a lot of Russian troops and gives Ukraine fighting chances because since Ukraine needs to control this line, they cannot dedicate as much forces to basically block Russians from entering the country because they need to protect their border elsewhere and also these lines, these lines, these lines. So Ukraine is kind of forced to be everywhere a little bit. Russians, on the other hand, they could have kind of, put the effort into the major lines, and if they wanted to cut off, like, they would do this. This is kind of was what discussed was their plan, but they don't. They actually are trying to advance in all directions at once, and this is basically a quintessential part because there is a political pressure to achieve political goals rather than military ones because they need by the certain date to have large amounts of territory. This obviously allows pretty much all the Ukrainian troops that are along this line to not just stand there and protect some demarcation line, but actually fight and contribute towards fighting. So they're actually able to make resist because Ukrainian troops are resisting better than the Russians when they are attacking because of the defender's advantage. And that's what in military terms have some experts referred to as super dumb. So that's if we thought that Russia learned something about being military competent after the be losing half of its army in the north and being heavily beaten, guess again they didn't. What they have is a lot of firepower and a lot of weapons, and obviously the attacker's advantage, which being that you choose which battle you fight because you are attacking. But let's consider where we are. So the two main Russian groups obviously will attack. I also said obviously that they're attacking on all directions, but there are also major axes of attack as well. So kind of the major hub point here, and then there's this point here, and also some smaller groups here, and obviously a group over here. And now we've been reported that group is gathering here. And obviously here the demarcation line where they're trying to push, so it's like there's another one here and all over these places. I'm just gonna pick a different color. Can I just quickly do this? Yeah, there we go, purple. So what does this tell us? Well, in the north up here, we have about like 40 to 60,000 Russians. So that's the main force. That's where they have the most of it, and that's where Russians are really wanting to make a break for it. So let's talk about how well they're doing. So if we go in, the offensive started about 2 weeks ago. Since then, Russian line was about here. So all this progress is about 20 kilometers each direction. And if we look here, then their advance started on the first day. They took Kremina. That was the first day of attack. And since they took Kremina, this is again all they have achieved from that side. That is 2 weeks of advanced fighting. The military art says your first attack should be, at least this is what the experts say, your first attack should be as heavy and as dangerous as possible, so you crush the enemy before it allows it to regroup. Ukrainians are like, the first attack didn't really came that strong, and they're actually circling in their reserves as they're getting depleted. So it's like a crawling attack. And because Ukrainians are exercising mobile defense, so they're trying to kind of hit and run. So what happens is Ukrainians have some kind of semi-fortified position that they're able to move out of if necessary. The Russians come in, small skirmish starts. The Russians try to pull out before they get any kind of attack. This is happening mostly because Russians don't really have the best morale. They are being forced to fight by their generals, and they're being sent to execute their orders, but they don't really want to fight. So they kind of come in, they get into contact with the Ukrainians, and then they fall back, and then they call in the artillery and aviation to strike the Ukrainians. The problem is when they try to pull back, Ukrainians are basically shooting them in the back and calling in their own artillery to fire at them retreating. This is exactly how it's happening on most of these for the last 2 weeks. Both sides are taking heavy losses. Ukrainians are taking less losses because they are obviously in some kind of a defensive positions. But because they're in defensive positions, they're trying to obviously escape those positions safely once the shelling starts, or when there is a window for it. So the difference being right now, from what I've heard reporting, is about 1 to 3. It's normal to have a couple of hundred of Russians dying every day all along the front line. And so that means Ukrainians are also losing quite a lot. So that's about 100 dead Ukrainians every day as well, because they are also reporting heavy casualties. But the point is that Russians are losing much, much, much more. And this is going to come in important lately. What is also important about this advance to know and to understand that this has been now 2 weeks. Next week is expected to be kind of the culmination of this attack, the kind of where the Russians are going to be the strongest, because they're bringing in finally all the reserves. And after the next week, firstly, the Russians are going to get tired up. And secondly, some of the reinforcements for Ukrainians is going to come in, but I'm going to talk about it again a little bit later. So what is important for you to see here is that the big city here is Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. It's the regional area cities. And Russians, while there is arrows here, they are still not even near those cities. In 2 weeks, they were able to advance maybe 20 kilometers. That is pitiful. So what some people are believing, well, I mean, some people, the smart guys, the analysts, is that Russians, because there is a lot of firepower here. There's like they have a lot of artillery, like hundreds, like thousands of tanks and armored vehicles and artillery shells. So there's a lot of firepower. It's just because it is so slow for them to advance. But it's believed that they will be able to reach the outskirts of the city of Slavyansk. And then there will be essentially, if they will try to enter, they will get stuck. And if they're going to start encircling it, this leaves a lot of exposure, and it's expected that Ukrainians will start hitting their supply lines. So, worst case scenario, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk is going to get encircled, like worst case scenario. And then we get some kind of this is absolute worst case scenario. This is basically Ukrainians not doing anything. So the two big cities gets encircled. And then let's say they advance a little bit along this line, but that is not expected that they're going to be able. So it's and then we get this kind of half encirclement that's probably going to get held at all costs by the Ukrainians. This is basically the worst case scenario for Ukraine. A more realistic one is, as I expressed, it's Russians coming up to Slovyansk here, and they're being stopped. They kind of come here to Barvinkove, and they're gonna get stopped, and maybe they will kind of try to advance here, but again, it's Barvinkove. This is not gonna get them anywhere. All these have been fighting for the last 2 months. Chances that the Russians will advance are very slim. The resources Ukraine is possessing is pretty well supplied, so there is very little hope, unless something unexpected happens, that Russians will advance here. The same goes for this whole front line. It's heavily fortified positions here, so it's being held extremely heavily by Ukraine. Important to know about this this south position here is that at this line was where supposed to be the fresh army came in. So Russians in the north they kind of rearranged their army that was around Kiev, and they said, okay, let's put those troops back together and then like get them with some additional new men and kind of put them in a battle. And from south, we're going to use some kind of a new, fresh army that is combat ready. It's going to be less troops, but they're going to be combat ready because what do you say? It's an army that wasn't still in a fighting in Ukraine. It's the last army of Russia, and they've came in to this region, and they're getting completely destroyed because Ukraine is hitting here a lot of, and this is where the loss of the Moskva really hurts Russians because Ukrainians are able to do a lot of stuff here. They've been able to essentially cut off this supply line by blowing out the bridge, or was it here somewhere? But basically, yeah, it's a very important bridge, so like not a lot of railways. And in 2 weeks, and this is important, in 2 weeks there has been no advancements, not even 20 kilometers. It was zero, maybe a kilometer advancements around this region. This whole line here has not moved a bit at all. They are actually now getting really tired and they're getting really in trouble. And there's been reports right now that the people that were tied in Mariupol, and we're going to talk about Mariupol a little bit, they've been sent out to help, well, helps resupply or at least rotate the people that got tired on the front line. And that means that this direction might get in a little bit of a trouble quite soon. And then the dumbest idea yet. So everyone was expecting that Russia will just kind of, well, deal with what they have. They had about kind of this part of the region, and oh, sorry, no. So that was about the line, this Nihurivka, and then some of this. So this was essentially like what Russians were having, like this part. And everyone was expecting, okay, so they're just gonna fortify this, and they're gonna leave like minimal troops here, and they're gonna help fight on the eastern side because that's where the military objective is. Well, joke's on you, because what happens with the brilliant political command, they say, we need the administrative region of Kherson. An administrative region of Kherson is this line here. If you see, this is the line. So they say, capture all of this. We need this. It's a political decision. So now Russians have been forced to dedicate some additional forces from the east, essentially, well, denying them to go to the east and concentrating them here so they fight for these small settlements and trying to get to this administrative part of the region. It is dumb on so many levels because this is preventing the Russian. And Russians are losing here a lot of men because for nothing. Because Ukraine pulled kind of a lot of firepower from here because they needed to win the east, so they left like a minimum to defend the Mykolaiv. It was about equal with what Russians had around Kherson, and Russians are now attacking, so they are losing more men. Yes, they are winning some of the smaller settlements here, but they're just losing a lot more men here because they're trying to attack, which they didn't need to do, but they're doing it anyway. So Russians are just dying here for no apparent purpose except for political reason. And then let's go to Mariupol. Oh, Mariupol. So it's important to like, I think the most important fact that kind of escaped a lot of people that I've talked to is just, he said, oh, Mariupol is taken. Putin said Mariupol is taken. It's just a plant that is left here, right? You know, the Azov steel plant. Well, I'm just gonna quick maps for you. So I live in Linz, and I'm gonna show maybe some other cities and so on. And in Azov steel plant is big. It was one of the biggest steel plants in Soviet Union. It's basically was Soviet Union was like 350 million people. It was huge. And the point, this was like one of the major steel production facilities in Soviet Union. and it's not a building. It's not even a series of building. It's a place where you go and you stand, and you from horizon to horizon you see like plants, like steel plants, like this heavy industrial machinery. And most importantly, underground it, there is like a network from 3 to 5 floors down below. It's a whole network. It's a of underground tunnels that goes underneath that are made of concrete and steel, and it's rock solid. It's a whole town that is under the steel plant. And I want to show you just how big this is. So I'm just gonna take and measure distance here in Odense. So if we start from around Odense train station, which is here, right? So let me see. So let's see. So it's about 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers. There we go. So it's 5 kilometers this way. So it's let's say it's about outskirts of the of Odense. It's about where I work. And then we put about 5 kilometers this way. And then another 5 kilometers this way. And then we go back. Oh, it's just evenly. So the area that you're seeing right now, this is approximately the size of Azov steel plants. Obviously, it's not completely overarching, but it's about 20 square kilometers. It is huge. Sorry. I misjudged it a little bit. Let me just clear it just a little bit. Maybe like this. Maybe like this. Oh no. Yeah. So maybe not as big, right? Maybe I was just a little bit too. But yeah, something like this. So it's this pretty much the center of Odense with fully with some of the closed districts is this steel plant. It is massive, and it's layers of underground. It is impossible to engage. And what I was trying to explain is basically that there's a whole city inside of a city in Mariupol. And while they can hold there quite long because of the political decision, it is expected that Putin will go for drastic measures. And I haven't heard this from the analysts, but I would probably expect Putin to use chemical weapons at some point. And I would be on the outlook for this because he really wants to pacify Mariupol. And because now he's forced to kind of draw away the troops from Mariupol, and because they're all hiding underground, I really think that they will use something like this because I think it's important to understand for Putin that that people for him don't really matter, and he's not really in a caring type of guy. So where does this leave us? Let's take the Ukrainian perspective. Let me switch to a more greenish kind of. Yeah, perfect. So let's just take it a little bit. Yeah, perfect. So Ukraine has done small counteroffensives, and they are pushing north and kind of east from Kharkiv, and they're putting some counteroffensive. That's pretty much it, and they are freeing and deblocating the city. And importantly, what they're trying to do is after they kind of push a little bit, they're going to be trying to kind of go this way. That was the most ugliest arrow ever. Go this way, and they're going to try to disrupt the logistics along this axis because that's a major logistics hub for the Izium direction. That's about the situation on the front lines. Let's talk about. There has been a lot of fires inside of Russia, and what these fires mean is that the Russians doing them or Ukrainians? Well, we need to understand one thing: Putin does not care about people, nor he cares about Ukrainians, nor he cares about Russians. but he does care about his troops winning. Well, maybe not as much because he doesn't really care about troops because look for point one, but he really likes winning. Uh, so, and the fires that are starting in Russia, why I don't think that they're false flag operations, is because they have been targeting oil facilities, weapons, munitions, like, some really important military thing that really helped winning the war. If Putin wanted to do a false flag operation, he would assault, well, people, because remember, he does not care about people. It's just material. It's a means to an end for him. So here we are now with a situation that Ukraine is able to execute some kind of attacks. How does Ukraine do it? The obvious answer: Western supplies. So, what's the perspective for this war? Western supplies are now coming into Ukraine. It obviously takes time to logistics to get into Ukraine. It also takes time to get people and train those people. Let's do step by steps. What about logistics? Well, there's recently has been a conference in Ramstein where, among other things, that discussed just what kind of weapons to supply to Ukraine. There was a big discussion about how fast these weapons should be supplied to Ukraine. And basically, they've removed a lot of checks and balances and tried to optimize and unify the way how the supply should be handled. So they are optimizing the process of delivering supplies to Ukraine, which means logistics are getting improved fast. Now, how much of these things are going to get supplied? Well, if anything in the news to go by, it seems that after the Ramstein conference that happened just recently, and after the John Biden has announced the Lend-Lease Act now has announced that he is seeking an additional 20 billion euros in military help to Ukraine, and the Lend-Lease Act has been approved by the House now. It seems that the supplies to Ukraine are going to grow exponentially. I think Western powers, because it's not only NATO, it's also a lot of other Western powers. Because Ramstein, if anything, we saw gathering, it was what we call the West, because there was also something like South Korea, Japan, so on. And I think by this point, everyone is kind of, yeah, like we cannot deal with Russia anymore, at least with Putin's Russia. So they say, I think the decision has been made that this Russia needs to go, and and I think the nuclear threat is not gonna be as effective anymore because everyone kind of understood that basically if Putin can justify aggression by giving out nuclear threats, then this aggression can be extended, well, basically to their own borders, and then their own troops will need to fight and die and so on. And basically, it's better to try to stop him now than to try to stop him later. With this said, second part of this, the training. Well, some of the training has already been started in Ukraine, and we know that Ukraine has a lot of manpower. They have mobilized a lot of people. They're reporting obviously like 6-to-1 ratio, but that's a little bit of, I'm taking a little bit of skeptical position, but let's say 3-to-1. So I'm removing double this. So they have about 3-to-1 people that can want to participate in the army, but they are not able to because there is no firepower. Obviously, I'm not talking about like a handguns. I'm saying like to form like a proper battalion groups and so on. So like armor, tanks, artillery, you name it. With the Western supplies now coming in, all these reserve groups are going to start getting trained and they're going to start getting ready to go into the combat. This will take some time. And then third one is getting from the training camp to the Ukraine. Ukraine is big. Russians are targeting supply lines, railway networks, and so on. So it's gonna take maybe some days to get from the west side or the center of the country, where probably those training camps are located, then to the east side. All in all, it is expected that we're going to see about a week of intense fighting, with Russians gaining some progress in the coming next week. Then the week after, we will probably see the slowdown, if at all, any kind of progress, because Ukraine is gonna start getting some of the supplies. The week after that, we're gonna see some small wins for Ukraine, some here and there, some attacks, more attacks in the Russian territory, more attacks. The Russians gonna start being pushed back here and there, maybe like super small places. But basically, it's gonna get into this, like, so middle of May, it's gonna get into this equal stage where none of the sides has the advantage. And then by this end of May, by the start of June, we're gonna start seeing Ukraine gathering for counteroffensive. Whether it's gonna be slow and just kind of rolling forward, or they're gonna just gather up the troops and then hit back hard, we're gonna see. I don't know. I'm not a military planner. I'm not making any decisions about it. But we can expect that Ukraine in about June, mid June to July, there will be a big counteroffensive by the Ukraine to then retake what was captured from it and then start breaking the teeth of Russians. What the Russia can do to prevent this? Well, it is expected that Russians will try to force their new recruits that were started to get recruited, not reservists, but they have like a mandatory service in the army. So it's like 19-year-old guys that got recruited basically in April, May. They got like about a month or two of training. So by June, there's going to be like 3 months. It is expected that they will be thrown into meat grinder. So the equipment that Russians are now getting back from their equipment facilities is old, and obviously it cannot even measure closely to the Ukraine's equipment. And as the weapons are being supplied to Ukraine will grow, as the reservists of Ukraine are going to start getting trained on it, and they're going to start forming proper battle groups, that is when the tides will turn. And I would expect by the end of June, July, we're gonna see basically some really well worth it the news and well worth the effort, like where the effort of Ukraine and our Western allies actually paying off. It's a long way to go, but this is what the experts are saying, and we'll see what the Putin response is gonna be.